Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm really excited to be starting the Sovereign Vibe channel and talking about geopolitics, international finance, sovereign debt, and so many other topics. So today I really want to dive into talking about Senegal, which recently had a very important election, not only for West Africa, but for the entire continent and beyond, for much of the world, for a lot of the developing world, in fact. Before I jump into the main part of the video, I just want to preface by saying election in Senegal was mostly about the Senegalese people wanting change, which overrides any other concerns that I'm going to be talking about. And those concerns that I really want to bring to your attention are related to ethnicity. I really want to talk about ethnicity because there's so little coverage of this topic when talking about African elections. And it's really helpful to keep this in mind when you're thinking about what is going on in Africa, what some of the political dynamics are, and how you should think about it as either an investor, a policymaker, or any other type of stakeholder who cares about Africa's future and the future of any developing and emerging country. First, diving into the facts about Senegal's election, the former president, at the time of recording here in April 2024, Macky Sall, was in power from 2012 all the way up until March of 2024 when he lost the election. Now, there was a lot of controversy surrounding this election because President Sall was trying to seek an unconstitutional third term and was trying to change the constitution to suit this, which led to a lot of protests and a lot of concerns, a lot of worries around the world that Senegal would not have a peaceful transition of power or slide from democracy into some sort of dictatorship. But fortunately, that did not happen. The elections ended up going forward, and the authorities, the government under President Macky Sall, released some of the political opposition who had been put in prison and allowed them to run. Not all of them were allowed to run by the Constitutional Council, but some of them were, which is why a 44-year-old political novice and former tax inspector ended up winning the election outright in the first round. What you have to understand is that often these elections need to go 2 rounds if an outright majority isn't secured in the first round. But when an outright majority is secured in the first round, the candidate with fewer votes can concede defeat, which is what happened. So Macky Sall's anointed candidate, Amadou Ba, lost the election and conceded defeat the next day. So this was a victory for democracy and for the Senegalese people any way you cut it. That's a real positive development. But amid all this electoral coverage, no one was talking about ethnicity, or at least not from what I could tell outside of Senegal. Now, as one of my favorite political commentators on Africa, Bernard Hugon, likes to say, in Africa, ethnicity doesn't explain everything, but nothing can be explained without ethnicity. So if you look at the electoral map of the 2024 results, of the election in Senegal, the breakdown actually follows ethnic lines, more or less. Macky Sall and his candidate are of the Fula, or in French, Peul ethnicity, which tend to have a majority population in the northeastern parts of the country, and some other parts of the country as well, but mostly in the northeast. Whereas Faye comes from the western part of Senegal, and one of his political associates, who's actually prime minister, comes from the southwest of the country. So it ends up that Faye dominated these western and southwestern parts of Senegal, whereas Ba got more votes in the northeast. Although it seems like his margins weren't that big in the northeastern parts of the country, which is why he lost the election ultimately. Whereas Faye really dominated the western and southwestern parts of the country and did well outside his ethnic Wolof stronghold. This is an important consideration when you think about the future of democracy in Africa. And why is that? Well, first of all, look at Senegal's demographics. 75% of the population is under 35. Senegalese women are still having, on average, 4 children, which makes for a crazy looking population pyramid. There are way too many young people. This leads to a bit of instability. This is not a Goldilocks outcome. When it comes to demographics, you don't want too few births and you don't want too many births. You want somewhere in the middle. One reason why there is such breakneck demographic growth is the communitarian outlook by Senegal's different ethnic groups. And you see this all over Africa, where the whole idea of one person, one vote is rooted in Western Enlightenment and individualism, which is a relatively new concept to Africa. In Africa, historically, everything has been focused on community. So how can you serve your community? It's not necessarily about your own personal views. Obviously, there are many caveats, many exceptions to this generalization, and there are advantages to democracy, and one person, one vote does make for a rather fair system. But in the African context, what it incentivizes is demographic competition. So it incentivizes each ethnic group to have a high birth rate, so that way you can be in political power, win elections, and serve your community in that way. So it's not a great mix having this breakneck demographic growth being partly fueled by democracy. It would be good to find a way to break this loop, but in any case, this is a topic that does not get enough attention and that should be considered more by observers of Africa and of democracy around the world.